Homage to you, the greatest of gods. Receive me, for I belong to you, and your heart is glad. As for my corpse, it is rejuvenated. The Pyramids of Giza. The whole world has been enchanted by their mysterious beauty for over 4,500 years. Within their walls are enclosed secrets that no one has yet managed to unveil. The Pyramid of Pharaoh Cheops is one of the most amazing buildings ever built by man, the only construction of the 7 wonders of the world which has survived to the present day. The passing of time seems to have no effect on these ancient stones.
I always say that pyramids built Egypt, because building pyramids made the Egyptian to know about art and astronomy.
Pyramids were built as royal tombs, but the pyramids and their surrounding complexes served not only as eternal resting places, but also as a resurrection machine, where the king made the transition from death to eternal life. The pyramids developed out of the royal and elite mortuary complexes of the first dynasties. The first monumental pyramid, which has a stepped profile, was built for a king named Netyenket Jossa in 2700 BC. Only a few generations later, the true pyramid with its 4 sloping sides was created. Cased with a sheathing of fine white limestone, these pyramids, when newly built, would have shone in the sun. The shape of the pyramid echoed the primeval mound on which the creator god stood to bring the world into being. It was also an image of the sun's rays as they streamed down to earth. This form was a magical symbol of regeneration, linked to the daily rebirth of the sun. For 200 years, Egyptologists focused their studies on the kings of the 4th dynasty and their officials. Archaeologists have found statues, temples, inscriptions and tombs on the Giza plateau. However, nobody has ever stopped to ask a question. For hundreds of years, it was believed that slaves had been forced to carry out this work by their tyrannical rulers. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, reported that it took 100,000 slaves working for 20 years to build a pyramid.
What we found are evidence about the people. Actually, the people who built the pyramids.
The truth is, the pyramids were built by native Egyptians who worked willingly in the service of their kings. Egyptologists have known this for a long time, but until recently, direct evidence for the pyramid builders was lacking in the archaeological record.
As we said earlier, Herodotus talked of 100,000 men. However, recent studies estimate that about 22,000 workers were involved. Pyramid building was arduous work. The ancient Egyptians were exceptional engineers. The style in which the pyramids were built and the mathematical and architectural standards used were exceptionally advanced for that era. We just need to take a look at some figures from Cheops's pyramid to see how exceptional these buildings really were. Measuring 146 meters in height, its sides are perfectly aligned to the 4 cardinal points within 1 degree of arc. The sides measure 230 meters with a mean error of only a few millimeters. Additionally, according to some researchers, the Great Pyramid was placed at the exact center of all the land area of the world, 1/3 of the distance between the equator and the North Pole.
We believe now that the Great Pyramid was built in 32 years. We did a survey and we discovered that all the stones for building the Great Pyramid were taken from the south of the Great Pyramid or to the east of the Second Pyramid. They established a ramp constructed of stone rubble and mud. And they constructed the ramp from the south side to be in the southwest corner of the main pyramid as a permanent ramp.
Blocks of limestone had to be hauled from the pyramid quarries up ramps to be set in place as the pyramid grew. It took massive amounts of stone to build these pyramids. However, it is not possible to work out exact quantities. The number of blocks used in the Great Pyramid range from 1 to 2.5 million. 22,000 people were therefore needed to build a pyramid, and the work was split between laborers, artisans, overseers, team leaders, and other specialized staff. But who were the pyramid builders, and where did they live? And how did they spend their days? Zahi Hawass has focused part of his research work and efforts on finding the city of pyramid builders. During the 80s, surveys were carried out in preparation for a new sewer system, which was to serve the suburb located at the foot of the Giza Plateau. This work unearthed the remains of an ancient mud brick wall. Between 1988 and 1989, Hawass and archaeologist Mark Lehner kicked off an excavation project in an effort to find the lost city of builders, 400 meters south of the Sphinx and beyond the Wall of the Crow, within which the sacred area was contained.
The town could not be to the north because there is a very big drop behind the pyramids to the north. It couldn't be to the west, it's too far from the valley, from the river. It had to be to the east, but there we thought there was a canal or harbors, and so the southeast seemed the right place to look for the settlement that would have functioned with all the other elements in the landscape.
Dr. Zahi has excavated up the slope to find the workers' cemetery, and we've been excavating a large settlement here down below the cemetery, where we think the workers might have lived and where they might have been fed. Food might have been prepared, and grain was stored to feed them.
Do those ruins, discovered by accident, belong to the lost city of builders? At the site, the archaeologists discovered different types of buildings.
Probably the biggest feature of the site are these long galleries or corridors, and they occur in big blocks, 4 big blocks of these galleries over a length of almost 200 meters by about 100 meters. And they are attached to this giant stone wall called the Wall of the Crow at the northwest part of our site.
You have very unfriendly streets here. You have 3 streets, east-west, with no twists, no corners, no place to hide. So streets where you could see who's coming to work and who's staying behind. At the beginning and end of the streets, you have guard houses, as it were, or overseer houses. We have an enclosure wall around this part of the town. And so we think these structures were used like barracks. We think this site is for the pyramid builders, the workers, because it is similar to other sites where you have an architecture laid out in a very regular way, by the state, very strange, large structures, basically like dormitories, like army camps.
There most probably used to be two separate villages. One settlement contained large dormitories where seasonal workers slept and were fed, while the other in the eastern area contained more comfortable homes which were allocated to artisans and overseers who lived there with their families. Mark Lehner's team managed to rebuild one of the artisans' homes thanks to an innovative technique. They covered the original foundations, then built this full-scale model on top.
We're now in the eastern town, inside one of the houses of the pyramid builders that's been reconstructed by the archaeologists here. The foundations were here, and then what they did was they built them up to this height using the same technique and the same size bricks as would have been used in ancient times, and also using plaster made with ancient techniques. This house is divided into two main sections, the interior of the house and then the courtyards around the interior that would have been used for industrial sort of activities. Evidently there was a lot of faience found in this area, so there may have been some faience working here. And over here we have an area where there's evidence for burning, and also on the other side of that wall, some sort of industrial activity going on here, perhaps connected with faience working, perhaps cooking, something like that. This doorway here leads to the interior of the house, and if you get in close here, you can see there's a little socle where there was a pivoting door of some sort. You can also see that there's a kind of a dog-leg entrance. If I go in here, then I have to turn this way to actually enter, and this would give the interior of the house more privacy and also protect it from the winds that might have blown in from the desert. And the inside of the house would have been the only area that was really roofed with wooden beams and matting and mud daub. So the interior of the house here is where the family would have gathered and done indoor activities of various sorts. The children would play here. We've got a low, what's called a mastaba, or bench here that could have been used for sitting during the day and sleeping at night, and a sleeping niche right here. So here in the eastern courtyards, we have things that have to do with the processing of grain. This is a reconstruction of part of a silo where grain could have been stored. And over here is an emplacement where grinding would probably have happened. Someone could have knelt and actually ground the grain to prepare it for baking.
The reconstructed house gives us an excellent idea of what life must have been like for some of the pyramid builders that lived here and worked at Giza. We can imagine that a workman living in the Giza settlement might have woken up early, washed and dressed in a loincloth or short kilt. He said some prayers, had breakfast of bread and garlic with beer to drink. It might have taken him 20 minutes to walk from his house into the royal installation, where he would have picked up his tools, through the wall of the crow, then up to the pyramid site. The builders' special diet was the secret of their great strength.
We know that these people were fed an enormous quantity of meat. In fact, we think that using statistics and using the samples of ancient bone material from their garbage, the people who lived here 4,500 years ago, we think that there's enough meat that was consumed here to feed 6,000 to 7,000 people if they ate meat every day. The people here were eating extraordinarily well. Prime beef. And of course, beef is the most expensive, and most prestigious of all the meat consumed.
Without animal proteins, they wouldn't have been able to move stones day in, day out for long periods of time. When the workers died, they had the honor of being buried close to their rulers. Hawass found the builders' cemetery in the desert depression south of the Wall of the Crow.
The people who were buried here actually were the workmen who died during the construction of the pyramid. The cemetery were completely intact because there's no gold. When you look underneath this structure, you'll find a skeleton only.
builders were first buried here under Cheops's reign during the 4th dynasty.
The most important discovery in the tombs of the pyramid builders are really pottery. Pottery can give us lots of important things that we found out that the date of the cemetery is Dynasty 4 and Dynasty 5. And that is the time of building the pyramids at Giza and maybe the pyramids at Abu Simbel. But we can find here molds has been found, many pottery, but the most important thing is really beer jar. The beer jars are very important to the ancient Egyptians, especially the workmen. The workmen would drink beer in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening. Beer was very important to them, and therefore they wanted to fill this jar with beer that they can really drink in the afterlife. You know, the most important thing here, that if you look all these tombs, they were built from mud brick and also supported by chunks of limestone, basalt, and this is of what's left over of building the pyramids. The workmen saved these chunks of limestone from the pyramids and they built it with their tombs.
Archaeologists uncovered hundreds of very different tombs.
The tombs here were built in a variety of styles, some evidently reflecting provincial traditions.
There are two cemeteries, a lower cemetery and an upper cemetery. The first cemetery, the lower one, is located in the lowlands and contains the tombs of the overseers. Each tomb is surrounded by numerous smaller tombs, the workmen who had worked for the overseer and his family.
We discovered a lot of graves here. When we discover a grave like this, we used to take the measures and then to see the materials and the design and to compare them between it and the other graves. So when we discover a skeleton like this, we used to give it to one of the doctors to come and to take it and then to check and study and take his time and then to send a report for us, telling us about everything connected with the skeleton of this workman.
A team of anthropologists studies any bones that are found. The tests carried out on the workers buried in these tombs supply the archaeologists with very important clues which are then used to establish their state of health, age, and any diseases they suffered from.
The study of the bones in the tombs of the pyramid builders were very important. We have a team of anthropologists. They come to the excavations and they began to collect every piece of bone from the tombs, and we bring it here, we put it under the name of the tomb itself. It has a number, and they begin to study the bones. As a matter of fact, maybe this is the first time that the bones of the workmen of the pyramid builders been studied. It's very important to give us an idea about the height of the people. They were like us, about 5 to 6 feet, about 175 to 180 centimeters. They were not really giant people who can move the stones, and the average age of death were 30 to 35. That's really strange. We believe that maybe they had this diseases that comes from the water that eats the organic. They call it bilharzia, and that's maybe the reason for the cause of the early age of death.
The pyramid builders' bones are a testament to the physically exhausting lives they led.
Then you can see that stress is really clear in every bone because they move stones. Young people came from Upper Egypt and they moved the stones. They had problems in their back. Women also, they bring water, food for the workmen to build the pyramids. But the most important thing that we found in our study, we found that most of the bones of the workmen, they had accidents. If they had a stone fell on their hand, then they fix it. And we found many bones that they made support with wood. And also we found one person had an amputation in his leg. Since 4,400 years ago, there was medical treatment, like today. Beside the pyramids, if anything happened to the workman, they save him.
We found also in one of the skulls here, we found that one person had a cancer and they did a surgery, a brain surgery for him, and he lived for 2 years after this surgery. And that is a very important point that can tell all of us for the first time that the builder of the pyramids were not slaves.
A ramp connects the lower cemetery to the upper one. The tombs of the artisans and lesser officials are located on the slope that leads up from the lowlands.
The upper cemetery are tombs of the technicians, like draftsmen, craftsmen. We found in this cemetery unique titles, like the overseer of the side of the pyramid, the overseer of the workmen who drag the stones, the overseer of the harbor. Another unique tomb that we found. This is a pyramid-shaped tomb, but built of mud brick. And the deceased, the overseer of the workmen, was buried underneath the pyramid. And this is going to change completely our idea that pyramids, thought by every scholar, that was connected only in the Old Kingdom with kings and queens. But now, it came from the court of the poor. Pyramids can be for everyone. And this is really what's amazing about this discovery.
The inscriptions found in the tombs tell us about the workmen's daily lives.
This is again one of the most amazing tombs. That this poor man was chief of the workmen. His name is Nefertiti. And actually I feel with some evidence that I will tell you that this man was in charge of the bakery that found to the east of the tombs of the pyramid builders. And really what's amazing about this tomb, we can see Nefertiti standing and look down here. They're making bread. They have the dough in the jar, and after that, this is making beer, and also you have his sons, and this lady is baking bread, and his wife had a title that she was really a wet nurse. She was helping in the delivery of the children. And in this tomb, he married 2 wives. And the names of the 2 wives were found inside this tomb. And he had more than 11 children. That is really amazing because this can show the relationship between the cemetery and the workman installation.
The discovery of the city of builders and the 2 cemeteries gives us an insight into a part of ancient Egyptian history which nobody has ever told us about before.
You have to know one thing, that the pyramid was a national project of the whole nation.
The pyramids symbolized the strength and power of the ruling dynasty. They ensured that the god of the sun would be reborn, magically preserving the world just as it was supposed to be.
Each village sends so many young men, and each nome sends so many young men to work for so many months for the king. Obviously, there is a kind of a reward in working at a philosophical level in a project which is to ensure the eternity, the eternal life of the pharaoh, which in itself ensures the eternal life of Egypt.
For centuries, the study of ancient Egypt was devoted to the quest for treasures, each more spectacular than the last. But modern archaeologists are more interested in finding the traces of the people who created the civilization and left these monuments behind. The search for the pyramid builders is the search for the men and women who built Egypt.
Actually,
Actually, it's amazing. You will see tombs that you never saw before. Those were the lost tombs of Thebes. Many tombs never opened before, never seen by anyone. Amazing scenes that show how the Egyptian took this as a step to immortality.
Hail to thee, O Nile, who manifests thyself over this land and comes to give life to Egypt. Mysterious is thy issuing forth from the darkness on this day whereon it is celebrated. Watering the orchards created by Ra to cause all the cattle to live, you give the earth to drink, inexhaustible one.
Greek historian Herodotus described Egypt as the gift of the Nile. This great river has always represented life itself to the Egyptians. It has allowed the country to survive for thousands of years and paved the way for a civilization which we are possibly only now beginning to fully comprehend. For the ancient Egyptians, life and death were inextricably linked together. After death, life on earth continued into the afterlife. Tombs were therefore more important than their homes, as it was the place where they would be spending most of their lives. A proper burial would have guaranteed a happy life in the land of Osiris. This did not only apply to the kings, but to whoever had the responsibility of providing for their own afterlife, and depended on how wealthy they were. The most famous necropolis in the world lies hidden in the mountains of ancient Thebes, along the western bank of the Nile. Around 3,500 years ago, the greatest pharaohs of the New Kingdom, ancient Egypt's golden age, were buried in the Valley of the Kings. During the last century, hundreds of private tombs belonging to the nobility, high officials and priests of the New Kingdom were found not far from the valley. Rich in wonderful wall paintings, these tombs remain virtually unknown. Only a few lucky people have been allowed to admire their beauty, as most of them are closed to the public.
We have hundreds of tombs there, and the tombs are unique because they have beautiful scenes.
A priceless treasure which, however, is at risk of disappearing forever.
Many scenes that's not recorded because no one have access to this type of tombs, and that's why I like the word calling them the lost tombs of Thebes. The public and even a scholar, they know only very few tombs. The famous one, the tomb of Rekhmira, a vizier that once his king gave him orders to rule through Ma'at, justice and truth. And this is really, in my opinion, one of the most unique that showing the relation between the person and the king.
As with the pharaoh's tombs, even those built for the nobility were designed to guarantee the deceased would have a safe journey after death into eternal life.
I have come and have been taken to those who are in their divine assembly, and who kneel down in front of me. Adore me, because I have risen and gathered myself together as a golden hawk with the head of the Benu.
However, the most precious treasures that the lost tombs have to offer are the paintings that tell us about everyday life. The hunting and wheat harvesting scenes, as well as the wonderful grape-picking frescoes, give us an exceptionally clear picture of what life was like more than 3,000 years ago. In TT 81 22, the tomb of a high official of the 18th dynasty, we can see an example of an important event in the life of an Egyptian, the pilgrimage to Abydos, legendary burial ground of the god Osiris, and necropolis of the early kings of Egypt.
We're just about to go into one of the lost tombs, TT66. Only a couple of the Theban tombs are open, and the rest you can only get into with special permission. So I've never seen this tomb before, I've never seen pictures of it. It's really a wonderful moment.
TT66 is Apu's last home, vizier to Pharaoh Thutmose IV, who lived around 1400 BC.
You can see most of the decoration in this tomb is gone. And if you look at the ceiling, which is beautifully painted to resemble a beautifully patterned textile, you see all this blackening here. Somebody was probably living in this tomb and had a fire here that eventually really destroyed this area. They've also deliberately chipped out, this was once a figure of the tomb owner. They've deliberately chipped him out. And then a lot of the rest of the decoration has just fallen off the walls, but there's still some wonderful details left. So this is a scene of manufacture. As vizier, he would have been responsible, for example, for supervising this sort of activity. We can see here a statue of the king kneeling. Then we see people here making a chariot. Some people here making sandals, so leather working. And down in this register, you see these rectangular objects are ingots of metal, and the people below are blowing into a fire to make it burn hotter, so they'll be melting the metal down to use that. Very little else remains. Oh, this is beautiful. A procession of men carrying some sort of branches. Usually that was done as a celebration of something or as part of a procession. Really wonderful details, but most of it completely gone. Oh, this is wonderful. Here we have making wine, picking grapes in preparation for making wine. And then here at the bottom, again, we're in the marshes, and we have this, what's called a clap net, filled with birds. And there's a rope that comes out here and is being grabbed. You can't actually see the rope, but it should be there, being grabbed by people who are pulling the net closed, and here's the guy who's telling them what to do.
The frescoes of some of the tombs describe the work carried out by their owners in minute detail. Mena, for example, the owner of TT69, worked for the agricultural estates of the king and the god Amun, so we find scenes of agriculture in his tomb chapel. Mena also supervised the making of wine.
Tomb, TT125, it's very large, once beautifully decorated example of the T-shaped tomb. And here's the funeral procession. We actually have the mummy lying in a bier on a sledge being pulled by a group of men as part of the funeral. And over on this side we have the offering meal. And you have harpers and singers and celebrants, and the tomb owner sitting there receiving piles of offering. And there he is with his wife. In the back, these gorgeous rock-cut statues. The tomb owner in the center with a woman. Could be his wife, could be his mother. I can't see enough of the inscription to tell. On one side, and another man on the other side, and you can see here the men have this dark red skin and the woman has this golden skin. These are the focus of the cult. This is to whom offerings would have been made. And remember, we're in the upper chapel here, so the mummy and the funerary equipment would have been in the burial chamber below.
Many of the lost tombs of Thebes haven't even been recorded in the state registers.
There is many lost tombs, but no one knows anything about them. They were completely sealed inside. Can you believe that some of the tombs inside them were mummies? That no one really cared to take the mummies out from the tombs.
Undiscovered treasures lie hidden in the Theban hills.
A vizier, or a priest, or a high priest, or a treasurer, or a workman, or an artisan. Those are the people actually who made Egypt. They built Egypt, or they built the Golden Age, the New Kingdom.
The workmen, artisans and artists who built the tombs for the pharaohs and the nobility during the New Kingdom lived in a purposely built village located in a barren part of the desert near the Valley of the Kings, known as the Place of Truth, Deir el-Medina.
We're here at the village of Deir el-Medina on the west bank of Thebes. This is a fascinating village. This is where the workmen who built the tombs of the pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings lived. The village was founded at the beginning of the New Kingdom and used until the end of the New Kingdom, when it was abandoned because it was unsafe to live here. This is a wonderful village. Here you can see the houses spread out here with the tombs of the workmen behind. One of the most wonderful things about this village is because it's in the desert instead of the floodplain, it's very well preserved. Many fascinating things were found here, including a great deal of written materials, which give us a lot of information about the lives of the people who lived here. It's a fascinating village, and I'm really looking forward to getting to go inside myself for the first time.
The village was isolated and surrounded by 6-meter-high walls. Workmen were under constant surveillance so as to avoid any contact with strangers. This is because they were the only ones to know exactly where the pharaoh's tombs were located. The Deir el-Medina community was highly organized. All its inhabitants worked for the pharaoh, and its courtiers benefited from a good standard of living and elevated social status. They were highly literate, as demonstrated by the hundreds of ostraca found in the village. They lived in spacious and comfortable homes.
You come in off the street through some stone steps, and again there would have been some stone jambs here. Come down into the entrance hall. And you can see that this is built on a foundation of kind of stone rubble, and then the walls would have been of mud brick up to 1 story. You can see nicely here that the walls were plastered and then painted. We can't see the decoration anymore today, but they generally were red along the bottom and then white going up. This would have been a low mud brick bench, probably going up to about here, and we might see it better in another house. And during the day, this would have been used for sitting on, doing activities on, and possibly at night for sleeping. There are often ovens back here for baking bread, but open to the sky because you don't want to do baking and things like that in a small and very hot enclosed space. Another important feature of these houses is, we can see here, stairs going up to the roof. All of these houses were 1 story high, so there would have been, when this village was in use, there would have been rooftops all over the place. You actually could have probably traveled from one end of the village to another via the roof. So now I'm coming into the second chamber of the house. You can see here what would have been a living sleeping platform. You can just see the top of it here, and then in the back this very nicely plastered and painted area, no decoration. And in the center we have a column that would have held up the roof. Also, probably they would have kept animals in here, which is very interesting and is also something that relates to today. If you go to villages in Egypt, you'll see animals inside the houses, something that we're not really used to in the Western world. We have here a really nice example of a limestone door jamb. This is really nice, expensive imported limestone. You can see traces of the red paint here, and here you can see where they put the bolt to lock the door. Most of these houses also have 1 or 2 of these cellars. This is coming out from under the the second room, and it would have been a place, a cool place underground to store foodstuffs, even furniture, things like that, but mostly for foodstuffs.
It's a fairly nice-sized chamber. It is indeed considerably cooler down here, but you could store quite a lot of things down here, probably to a large extent in big clay pots, which would also have helped to keep things cool.
Between 30 and 120 workmen were assigned to the construction of each royal tomb. They worked for 8 consecutive days in the Valley of the Kings. On the 9th and 10th days, they returned to Deir el-Medina to rest and spend time with their families. They were paid a monthly salary in kind, wheat for their bread and barley for their beer, and also fish, vegetables, firewood and oils for their bodies. However, during the reign of Ramses III, in around 1150 BC, supplies failed to arrive for several weeks. The workmen lay down their tools and refused to carry on working.
Year 29 of the reign of Ramses III, day 10 of the second month of the flood. The workmen have today marched into the necropolis crying, "We are hungry. We have received no food for 18 days.
It was the first strike in history. None of the workmen were punished by the pharaoh, and supplies were once again delivered on time. During the 2 days of rest they had every week, the workmen dedicated their time to building their own tombs on the slopes above the village.
Each tomb consists of 2 main parts. There's a chapel above ground, as we see here, and then burial chambers below. The upper chapels were where the families would come to make offerings to their deceased relatives. As you can see in this reconstructed example, the chapels were surmounted by these small pyramids. These are very important solar symbols, dating back to the Old Kingdom, but still very important here in the New Kingdom.
The tomb of Amenacht, servant in the place of truth, depicts the long journey that the deceased had to go through in order to reach the land of the blessed.
So we're standing now in TT 218 at Deir el-Medina. This is the Ramesside period tomb, which means dynasties 19 or 20, of a workman, someone who lived in Deir el-Medina. His name was Amenacht. Here is Amenacht himself. An important thing to understand about the underground parts of tombs is that it's all about resurrection. It's all about rebirth and the afterlife. So everything here is designed to help the tomb owner successfully make it to the afterlife and live there forever. Anytime somebody's facing out of the tomb, that usually means that they are receiving action like the gods, and here Amenacht and his wife facing out. This is Neat. This is Newt, and this is Neptune. This should be Amenacht again, and this you have a really nice place where you can see his title, Sejem Ash and Set Ma'at, which means worker in the place of truth, the place of truth being the Valley of the Kings, and his wife. The idea was that they'd get offerings in their chapel for eternity, but they knew that at some point probably all their closest relatives would die off and nobody would be bringing them real food anymore, so they put these offering formulas and also lots of magical things they buried with themselves to make sure that they had food forever, whether or not their cult was actively practiced or not. It's a very low doorway here. Ah, yes. More beautiful paintings here. This is the burial chamber. And let's just look at what we have here. Here we have the mummy of Amenacht on a lion-headed bed, traditionally used for embalming and mummification. And this is Anubis with the jackal head, or a priest wearing a mask of Anubis. all within a shrine made out of reeds. These are the fields of Iaru, the fields of the blessed, and this is where, if you successfully reach the afterlife and have done everything right and your heart has been weighed properly, this is where you end up, in an idealized existence.
O ye divine spirits, behold, here is my soul walking by your side. It talks to you, like you, it is blessed. As the scales of justice have cast their judgment, here I reach the region of truth and justice.
The Theban tombs represent a priceless treasure for both Egypt and the whole of humanity, and are a precious testimony of the life and culture of a civilization whose story continues to unfold. Unfortunately, these treasures are in serious danger, as the tourism it attracts is sometimes too intrusive, and the nearby population is not always as respectful as it could be.
Hundreds of tombs have unique scenes, and the scenes could be done if we are not going to open them and make a major important conservation within a plan.
The village of El Kurna, built close to the lost tombs of Thebes, is a perfect example of how the tombs are being threatened.
But look what's happening. Hundreds of houses everywhere. Side pollution. Houses have no shade. There is no sewage system. The water comes by from their houses. Every day they eat and they wash, and all this water goes where? It goes under the houses, and they go damaging the tombs completely.
3,200 people live above the archaeological site in homes that have no running water or electricity.
We built a new village for the people at Kurna. Then this finished completely. We are now in the process of moving those people, not by gentlemen, and tell them, please, can you move from destroying the tomb and go to live in this beautiful apartment that I built you? They will never go, because they have business. It's business. They don't care about the damage of the tombs at all.
Of course, they know the importance of the area. They know the importance of the tombs which they are living in. They know the importance of the archaeology which they are swimming in. And I think most of them are very rich now because of archaeology, because of the tomb robbery.
The inhabitants of El Kurna make their living thanks to tourism and have no intention of moving to the village that the Egyptian authorities have had specially built for them.
I live in Gorma. Luxor Gorma. I work every day in restaurant here. I think here it's very nice. The people care about the tombs, not the government. The government always wants people move to the new village, but the people don't like the new village because small house, small apartment, nothing nice. And the people born here, who work here, and if you go there, not work, nothing.
If the inhabitants of El Kurna were to abandon the village, their traditions would be lost. However, unless a solution is found which will protect the lost tombs of Thebes, this precious archaeological heritage will disappear forever. And with it, we will lose an important